Howdy, y'all. Welcome to this session, Build and Fight, Democratize Everything. My name is David Cobb. I use he, him pronouns. I am the secretary for the Build and Fight 501c4. You are here as part of the 2025 Green Party annual national meeting. Johanna and I are very excited about this program. It's going to be very participatory, but it's also being recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, simply turn your camera off. But otherwise, just know that this is recorded. This is designed to be fairly participatory. There is going to be a short presentation at the beginning to help frame this conversation. That framing is going to be done by Johanna Epke, who is the executive director of this brand new 501c4. And it is my pleasure to share with you just a few words. Johanna Epke is a longtime friend, comrade. She and I worked together at Move to Amend. She also is a former staffer for the National Green Party of the United States. She is a lawyer by training, but really she is a democracy activist and is literally the executive director of this brand new 501c4. I'm going to turn it over to Johanna.
Thank you so much, David. You stole most of my introduction, but that's great. Appreciate all of the kind words, and I'm sure many of you know David, a man who needs no introduction in these spaces. Again, I'm Johanna Epke. I use she, her pronouns. I am the executive director of this new 501c4 that David and I and others are building together, and we're really excited to share some of what we're up to, what we're planning, and workshop it. We want to hear from y'all. We want to hear your questions, your concerns, and have some discussion about what we're up to. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into a quick slideshow. We have about 8 or 10 slides, and just to frame some of this upcoming conversation, but I promise we have plenty of time reserved for discussion at the end. So if you could please hold questions till then. If you raise your hand, I probably won't get to it until the very end. So with that, I will start the screen share. Can folks see my screen? Great, wonderful. Okay, so why are we here? What are we up to? This is one of those spaces where I don't need to convince anybody in this room that we need to replace the corporate two-party system, right? The political structure in this country is corrupt. We don't need to dwell on the why. We're really focused on one tool that we see useful in the how of what we get past, how we get past that. So Build and Fight is a 501c4, which is a type of nonprofit organization that can engage in politics in ways that a traditional 501c3 cannot. And we'll get into that a little bit more about why this is a useful tool. The other piece of this is the specific strategy of what this C4 is up to, what we're focused on, a set of reforms that we talk about as non-reformist reforms or revolutionary reforms. But we want to engage in electoral politics from an explicitly transformational perspective. That means, we are not electoral fetishists. We do not believe that all change can come through elections, but we want to engage in them in a principled way, in a way that is strategic, focused on a handful, or more than a handful rather, of these non-reformist reforms. Build a cross-sectoral democracy movement. We want to engage in democratizing not just elections, but democratizing the economy, democratizing the law, democratizing society more generally. We see so much interest in democratic structure, democratizing everything, bubbling up everywhere, and sort of tying those together, making the case that these are all part of the same Gordian knot. And integrate political education into everything that we do. It's not just what we're doing, but how we're talking about what we're doing, how we are thinking about what we're doing, how we're framing it in relationship to the other pieces of what we're up to. So, like I said, democratize everything. These are the three sort of buckets of work that we have split our mission into, and I will go through these in order. So the first bucket, democratizing the economy, we're talking about public banking, participatory budgeting, community land trusts. These are all just forms of collective ownership and control of land, of housing, of energy production, of other forms of production, and really just a set of reforms that we see as not just tinkering at the margins in the economic space, but really an opportunity to move the needle on that and prove to people that these forms of democratization are valuable, are good for humans and planet, and are viable now. These are not just pie in the sky things. These are worthwhile and winnable fights as we go. David, I'm sort of blazing through here. I want to give you an opportunity to pop in if you have anything to add as we go.
Thank you, Johanna. So welcome everybody. The high level point I want to make is, and Johanna touched on it, but I want to zero in on it. Y'all, every single one of these specific reforms that we have identified at Build and Fight are already happening, right? Like I have the privilege of working in California. I'm part of the California Public Banking Alliance. We literally passed a law that allows for the first time in 150 years the chartering of public banks at the local or regional level. So, and we know that New York, Massachusetts, statewide, New Jersey, then there's Philadelphia. Like this movement on public banking is happening. Participatory budgeting, I can off the cuff could give you at least 24 that I'm aware of. There's probably hundreds of examples of participatory budgeting happening. There are thousands, plural, of community land trusts that are happening. Worker-owned cooperatives are burgeoning. The point that I'm making here, y'all, is every single one of these reforms are happening and alone are not transformational. What would make it transformational is if it was knitted together into a shared political project that understood that it was an explicitly post-capitalist way of framing the entire economy. And let's be honest, y'all, the Working Families Party ain't going to do that. The Democratic Party ain't going to do that. Progressive Democrats ain't going to do that. So what we've got to do, we believe, is to help the Green Party and other electoral forms take on these concepts. The policies alone are absolutely, or they're critical, but alone, that's not the secret sauce. The secret sauce here is to engage in electoral politics as unequivocal transformationalists or revolutionaries, which is the language I would use, eco-socialist, however you describe it, but in a very common sense, ordinary way. So that, I think, is why democratizing the economy is so critical and important.
Thanks, David. Moving right along, this is a slide full of reforms that this group, I hope, is familiar with. Talking about democratizing elections, breaking the two-party system, making elections actually responsive to the interests and diversity of American politics, including the Green Party. So we're talking about proportional representation, ranked choice voting, all forms of re-enfranchisement, abolishing the disenfranchisement, re-enfranchisement of felons and so forth, same-day voter registration, election day holiday, all of these things that actually make our elections, or potentially make our elections, democratic. And again, it's focusing on these. Each one of these by itself does not have the power to transform our democracy, our elections. And some of these, it really depends how it's structured or how we're implementing it. Like ranked choice voting, for example, I think has the power to transform American elections in this country. But it depends on how it's structured. And so, just to say that this is a list of reforms that we see as having the potential to be transformative, if we do them right, if we do them in connection with a broader movement for democratization. For folks that aren't familiar, I imagine everybody here is familiar with how ranked choice voting and proportional representation work, but I will just pause and take a minute to explain how these things are so important to third parties in particular, and breaking down the two-party system. So in the United States, in almost every jurisdiction, in almost every election, we use something called plurality voting, which is first past the post, or the idea that one person will win the election if they have the most votes, even if that means that they don't have a majority, that they don't have 50% plus one. And a lot of folks are familiar with runoff elections, which is when there are more than two candidates in an election for one seat, and nobody gets more than 50%, then the last vote getter is removed, and there's a runoff or a top two runoff, or there are various forms of runoff elections. And those address some of the concerns with plurality voting, that somebody can't win with just like 35% of the vote. An innovation on runoffs is something called instant runoff voting. I actually first became aware of ranked choice voting, which is what we called instant runoff voting, ranked choice voting 20 years ago when I first worked at the Green Party, because that was one of the sort of central reforms that the party was looking at the time. I wrote a white paper on it. But the idea is, instead of waiting for an election, having somebody get less than 50% of the vote, and then having to come back for another runoff that always have low turnout, we ask voters to rank their candidates in order of preference. And then if somebody doesn't get a majority of votes, then the runoff happens essentially instantly. The last voter, the last vote getter in the candidate list is removed, and those votes are reallocated to the voters' second choices, and so on, until there is a candidate that has a majority of votes. Now, there are even more exciting versions of this where we break down the single member district altogether. So, instant runoff voting by itself, cool, removes the spoiler effect. I'm sure that folks can understand and appreciate the value of that alone. It makes voting your conscience a lot more easy. It's, breaks down the sort of strategic voting complaint that folks have, the spoiler effect complaint that folks have about candidates running who aren't part of the two corporate major party structure. And so, that alone is an exciting reform and has the potential to make our elections more democratic. Going even further, other forms of ranked choice voting, including something called single transferable vote and proportional representation, really try to, the goal is to have an elected body really represent the interests and political, the politics of the voters, rather than, having to conform your vote to one of the two major parties or to a candidate that you don't really support, voting the lesser of two evils. I think, this country has had enough with the lesser of two evils, and it's time to move on. So the goal of proportional representation or proportional ranked choice voting is to really reflect that diversity. And how it is done is it varies in various places. Proportional representation is used in some form all over the world, in other countries all over the world, and has been for decades. And so there's various ways. There's something called party list. There's mixed member proportionality. Really what they're trying to do is have the legislative or representative body really proportionately represent the interests of the voters, or the party registration, the party votes of the various parties. And so you see in other countries, more viable political parties, more voices, more diversity, and a more accurate reflection of voters' preferences. So I will pause again. David, anything to add on this slide before we move on to?
Johanna, as my wife and partner, Ruthie Engelke, who is with the Theater of the Oppressed, has taught me to say, no notes.
No notes. Excellent. Well, I'm sure folks have questions or thoughts about some of these, which we will get to shortly.
Johanna, I will say already in the chat, M has asked a great question. I'll just jump in to say, M
Great.
is asking, will there be a discussion about the nuts and bolts of 501c formation and operation? And the answer is yes.
Yes, I will cover some of that, but if you have questions, we can certainly have save some time for discussion on that. So just real quick, the last bucket of democratization non-reformist reforms that we are looking at. As some of you may know, David and I worked together for many years on the campaign to abolish constitutional rights, overturning Citizens United and other cases, and various other forms here of democratizing the law. And the reason that this is a separate structure, a lot of folks think about Citizens United and corporate rights as this concept that a corporation can spend money in elections. And so, why wouldn't we just consider that part of democratizing elections? And the issue there is that this goes so much deeper than just elections, right? Corporate rights, the idea that a corporation has a constitutional right, is destructive to our society in so many other ways. The idea that a city can't regulate a multinational corporation's activities because it has the same 14th Amendment rights as people is an absurd result of these Supreme Court decisions, and something that we have to address to democratize law and society. And so I will David, anything to add on this one? I want to get to discussion, but
I'll just say this. As a radical lawyer and as somebody who self-describes as a revolutionary, I still remember the young David Cobb of my 20s, who had come out of the anti-apartheid movement as a student activist, who had worked in the global justice movement. And I was like, I need to get a law degree so I can fight for justice. And I look back and I remember that so naive young man who had good instincts. But what I came to realize, and I think everybody who comes in the Green Party realizes, is that the law is not going to be the mechanism by which we're able to be revolutionaries or transformational. The reality is that I could get individual justice for an individual client if the fact pattern was right, if I had a fair judge, if I got a good jury panel, et cetera. But that the problem was that the legal system itself protects property rights over human rights and cannot even conceive of the rights of Mother Earth, never mind a transformational reciprocal relationship itself. So the point that we're making here is democratizing the law, even as big as that is still not big enough. The 501c4 that Johanna, myself, Kalia Kuno, Gloria Matera, who's in the here in this workshop, those of us who are doing this see this as a very specific mechanism that can engage electoral politics, but also in movement spaces with a revolutionary vision that will democratize the law, democratize the economy, democratize elections, democratize all the things. And democratization is the language that I'm most familiar with because of my own politics, my own history, my own culture. But think about it as autonomy, think about it as liberated zones, think about it in any number of ways. What we're actually talking about is who rules. And at the end of the day, we are going to have to come to terms with the fact that the ownership of both the means of production, the way the legal system, the social political economy operates is fundamentally undemocratic, and we're going to have to address that.
Hear, hear. I saw a lot of clap and support emojis, David. So, these are all good things. These three buckets, these reforms, we could add to this list. What do they have in common? What are we doing with them? Why are we talking about them together in this way? So just some strategic orientation framing. So just to clarify, this entity is called Build and Fight and is a 501c4. So we have been talking about it as the Build and Fight C4 because this comes out of a broader build and fight strategy. This work is informed by some of our board members, David and others, who are involved in Cooperation Jackson, People's Network for Land and Liberation. These are folks doing on the ground co-op work, democratization work, and recognize the need for an electoral arm of the Build and Fight broader strategy. And so that is what we are talking about today. This is not a purely electoral strategy, but this is this is the 501c4 component of that. Jumping from the first bullet to the third, and then I will come back to the second because we've touched on that. The war of position refers to sort of an understanding of where we are and what the opportunities in front of us are. A war of position is in contrast to a war of maneuver. So the distinction between them being, a maneuver is if there was a maneuver or a set of moves that we could make to win. And there are winnable battles now, but I do not have with clarity, and I don't think anybody can honestly tell you that they know the 3, 4, 5 moves that get us to winning this war, right? We're just so far from that, and we do not have the conditions are not right for that. And I would say anybody that tells you they know exactly how we're going to win the revolution is full of it. And so I think being clear that we need to position ourselves, we need to understand this moment and the opportunity that we have, and make some moves not to get to the victory. We're not playing end game stress chess here. We're playing sort of, we're in the middle of the game. We are jockeying for position, and that's how we are looking at these non-reformist reforms. These are not, if we win a few of these, we do not get to the end. This is not the full slate of things that we need to do to get there, but this is a move that we can make that better positions ourselves in this long fight that we have ahead of ourselves. This this theory of strategy, this war of position versus war of maneuver is something that comes out of Antonio Gramsci's writings. And I would encourage folks to look that up. If they have questions, we could talk more about that. But just sort of, where are we? What are we doing with this? How does this fit into the broader strategy? And that brings me back to non-reformist reforms. We see the commonality between all of the things on those 3 lists as being sort of big enough to escape the status quo and worth doing now and winnable now. These are not like I said earlier, pie in the sky ideas. These are very winnable reforms, and they're not half measures that make further progress harder. These are stepping stones to something else, to the next step of this. So when we discuss, I will invite you all. I will ask what is missing from this list, what shouldn't be on this list, and I invite you to think about that framing of, what is big enough? Are these actually big enough pieces? Are these winnable? Are these too big? So that's how we're thinking about, the revolutionary reform, some of that strategic framework. And David, I'll pause and hand it back to you.
Yeah, so the next thing that we're going to do is a participatory round. There's been a few comments in the section, but what I've found is to ensure that every voice is heard. And Adam, I'm going to read it out for you. We're going to do 5 comments or questions. I'm going to call people's names. Then Johanna and I will react to that. We'll do 3 rounds of that. So you're more than welcome to pass. You don't have to make a comment or a question, but we are going to solicit folks' reactions. So round 1, we'll start with Adam, then Claire, then L, then Elizabeth, then M. And then Johanna and I will react to those. So again, Adam, Claire, L, Elizabeth, M. Feel free to pass if you like. Adam.
So is this just where I ask a question and then we go on? I want to make sure I'm understanding what you said.
This is an opportunity. If you have a question or a comment you want to make, this is a space for you to do so. If you don't, you can
Okay.
just pass.
Okay. Yes, I do have a question. And I basically, from what I understand, is I don't know if this is talking, because I noticed you mentioned earlier today about the banking system. And I don't know if this is talking about like, because how does this affect like disabled people? Because when you mentioned the banking system, uh, I know that I've like on income and all that, and on how disabled people are treated. Plus, then as you were going along with everything else, uh, I know that you talked about rank choice voting, but I was told there's a voting system called range choice voting where you give a person like 0 through 9, for example. And I don't know if you can explain maybe a little bit more about how that works as well, because I know you're saying, and then I'm not completely sure what they mean by C3 4 or whatever you said 4 versus C3. If you know what I'm saying.
I do. So
Over.
thank you, Adam. I've got those questions. So we will absolutely cover those. Claire?
Hi, y'all. Thanks for taking time to put this together and speak with us today and giving us a chance to participate. I'm working on, well, okay, I'm gonna just kind of shoot it out. I feel like my questions are just kind of big because there's a lot that I'm curious about and a lot that I don't know. But in this time and space, I guess I'm curious about you say that these things are implementable and winnable. I'm curious about what that means to y'all. What do you foresee it taking to make some of these measures happen? And as well, you had mentioned some, political parties that you wouldn't feel aligned with working with, such as the Working Families Party. But I'm kind of solidly in the camp of coalition building is necessary to really make big changes outside of the two-party system. So how does that fit in within your framework?
Thank you so much, Claire. I can't wait to address that one. Elle?
Hey, David. Uh, hailing from Texas too. Just wanted to uh, ask. Well, so this is like just a stopping point in the presentation.
Correct.
Okay. Because yeah, I have no idea about 501(4) versus or yeah, 4 versus 3 or any of that. And I guess similarly to the last question, um, uh, like in terms of coalition building and reaching workers and non-voters, and I'm just curious how this form of a nonprofit will differ from Green Party organizing in general. Like what's the difference? Like,
Yep.
yeah.
A great question, and we will absolutely get to that.
Okay, cool.
Elizabeth?
I put it into the chat. I'll read it. When you advocate democracy, what kind of democracy? Grassroots democracy, proportional representation, star voting, instant runoff voting, corporate democracy, which we have. One person, one vote equals mob rule. Are we in a democracy when a Democrat is president, or a republic when a Republican is a president, and an eco-society when a Green is president? I'd like to replace the word democracy in the Green Party with autonomy, because just as we speak, there are technology people out there creating you get your own government if you can govern yourself technology. It's sort of like when they stopped calling it cell phone and started calling it Android, suddenly everybody had autonomy. Let's stop calling it democracy and start calling it autonomy. Thank you. Over.
I see that you said you were just going to use the chat, but I'm going to
No,
give you
no, I should have put also.
Okay, go ahead.
Also. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure where to start because I've kind of got a list going. But just the basic point of how some of these reforms, how they are implemented and put into law. You really have to look at the legislation and what surrounds them, because otherwise they can just become another tool of the oppressive duopoly, I think is what I put in the chat. I'll just give a quick example. Public financing, if it's put into law or ordinance, depending on the level of government, that you have to collect a certain amount of money to even qualify on your own, instead of paid, instead of just flat signatures, it's like you have to get so many $5 donations or however many donations, that kind of stuff. And if the number is such that only a candidate that already has, a whole machine behind them qualifies, then you just end up giving public money to the people who already have the money from the party. That's like a real thing that has happened. I've seen it in my town. And there are some other things too, like 501c4s. And I do have a question. Can you address donor disclosure? Things like that. I'll just stop with my verbal comments.
Great, thank you for that. So we're going to pause now and let Johanna first, and then myself just address. These are great questions, and then we're going to do the next round of 5, which is in the chat. So Johanna, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I'll react.
Great, yeah. So we actually have one more slide. I'm just going to turn to that as part of answering some of these questions, and then we can turn the slideshow off so that we can see each other and have a little bit more of a discussion, if that sounds good to folks. So just really quickly, to be very clear, David and I have a long history with the Green Party, but Build and Fight is not a Green Party front group, nor are we any other party front group. We certainly, have our political tendencies, but just want to be very clear about that. So I'll first address the C3, C4. It seems like a lot of folks have questions about that, and then about star voting. It seemed like that was another big theme. So on the C3, C4 question, so 501c is a section of IRS code related to nonprofit entities, and so that it defines what kinds of entities can be federally tax exempt, and it goes all the way from 501c1, which is federal credit union or federal trusts, all the way up to 50126 or something. It might even go higher than that. There's, they get pretty obscure in high numbers, black lung trust funds and so forth. C3 is what most folks consider sort of a traditional nonprofit. That means it is tax exempt, federally tax exempt, and donations to a 501c3 are tax deductible for the donor. And there are limitations that come with C3 status, specifically in how they can engage in elections. So they can't spend more than about 20% of their time doing lobbying, and they can't engage in candidate elections in a partisan way, meaning they can't specifically endorse candidates. They can't hint about which candidate they prefer. They can do sort of questionnaire, sort of neutral information and scorecard for elected officials, but there are some serious limitations in terms of what C3s can do in terms of supporting legislation, ballot initiatives, candidates, and so forth. A 501c4 is very similar to a C3. It is a tax-exempt entity. We don't have to pay taxes on what we're bringing in or what we spend, but donations to a C4 are not tax deductible for the donor, which is the major sort of impediment to C4s over C3s. But in exchange for that, C4s are unlimited or much less limited in terms of how much lobbying they can do, how much they can engage in elections. It's not just, an educational organization that can do some ancillary or incidental lobbying or electioneering. And so it's not quite a PAC. The primary purpose is not to, do big spends and take out ads in candidate elections. We are not going to align with a specific candidate. That's not the purpose of the C4. The C4 is really to hold down this space and engage in some lobbying, but primarily we're looking at ballot initiatives and influencing elections in that way. So that's the difference between a C3 and C4. Somebody asked about sort of the nuts and bolts about incorporation. I don't know that we want to spend our time here focusing on you have to file a Form 1024 or whatever the specific nuts and bolts are. I will just say, it's very similar to starting a C3. You incorporate in a state as an entity, and then you get you apply for the tax exempt status from the IRS using a fairly lengthy form. And then there are disclosure and reporting requirements very similar to a C3. And, if folks have specific questions about that, I would welcome those in the chat, but rather than, doing a full lesson on what a C4 is and how to incorporate it, I think I will leave that one there. In response to the question about score voting or range or star voting, so just to clarify for people that don't know what those are, so I described ranked choice voting where you rank your candidates. There are other proposals out there, including, as somebody mentioned, score voting. So rather than just ranking your candidates 1, 2, 3, you score the candidates based on your preference. You can give somebody a 10, somebody a 2, somebody a 1, and then the scores are added up. And so you can actually not just express preference in terms of order, but you can express preference in terms of magnitude of support. And so, some folks are supportive of that. Star voting is sort of a hybrid. Star stands for score, then automatic runoff. So basically you score and then there's a runoff component. It's sort of a hybrid of those two. And there are some strong advocates of that in various parts of this country. But all of that's to say, the specific process or mechanism for how we get there is less important to me. The destination of truly proportional representation is what we are actually interested in. And, rather than get into a debate about which one of those is better, some of them are being tested. Frankly, I think that some of them, have some proving to do, and I support sort of the laboratories of democracy in the states, different states trying different things. There are also a bunch of academics really interested in this question. And another hat that I wear is as a board member of an entity in California called ProRep, the Proportional Representation Coalition. And they are convening a process to debate exactly how we get to proportional representation, what the best form of proportional representation is, and how we get there, and some of the nuts and bolts about that. And so, that's all to say, we at Build and Fight we don't have a specific preferred method to get there. I personally think some are more likely to succeed than others, and there's nuance in terms of how they are structured, like I mentioned earlier. And so that's all to say, we support them all. I don't distinguish between star, score, rank, party list in terms of one is categorically better than others, but they are all potential ways to get to the real gold star, which is actual proportional representation. David, anything else you'd like me to cover, or maybe I hand it to you and see if I have anything else?
Yeah, I'll do it with an apology, Johanna. I forgot that there was one more slide, so let me just take the ownership of that mistake. Thanks for being so graceful about slipping it in. My quick reactions, Adam. The question around disabled people, that is a very critical question. Thank you for bringing it up. And from my perspective, it would be addressed anytime there is a specific ballot initiative, anytime that there is a specific candidate questionnaire, etc. So that question should always be part of any political conversation for either a C3 or a C4 or a candidate or a ballot initiative. So just wanted to name that. Claire, I really appreciate you sort of talking about, wait a minute, like, how are we going to implement these and how do we build coalition work? Let me be very clear. In California, it was the progressive wing of the Democratic Party that passed public banking. There are no Greens in the California state legislature. So to me, I'm interested in working with people that I can work with. I'm a registered Green, but I lobby Democrats, Republicans. I engage with libertarians. So I want to be acknowledge where you and I are in agreement about the need to actually work with people where we can. Again, I'm a registered Green. I'm proud to be a Green, but I don't think that in the Green Party alone has the political muscle or power to move this. That's part of the reason why Johanna, myself, Kali Akuno come out. Like I'm very proud of the list of the board of directors who are here. We are not Democratic Party front groups. We're not aligned with the Working Families Party or the Progressive Democrats or anybody else, but we will work with them when it makes sense. Elizabeth, I wanted to take on your intriguing part about the idea that the Green Party should replace the word democracy with autonomy. It got my interest. But remember, this 501c4 is not an arm of the Green Party. This workshop is us saying we want to work with Greens who want to work with us, but we are not a front group for the Green Party. We're going to be having conversations with lots of different folks. We'd like to engage at the local level, especially on ballot initiatives where there's actually some, in my language, boots on the ground. One of the things that I have helped successfully run a lot of really transformational ballot initiatives, and I believe in doing political education and having political discourse. But this C4 exists in order to move policy. So that's my first round. We're going to do these in rounds so that everybody gets a chance to participate. So I'll just say round 2. Emily, Gil, Gloria, Josiah, and Lisa. And again, feel free to pass, but it's Emily, Gil, Gloria, Josiah, Lisa. Emily, you're up.
Hey, David, you can go ahead and pass on me. I'm just observing today.
Okay. Gil.
Hi. Like your description, I was on a path, from Shirley Chisholm and Ron Dellums to DSA to the Green Party, and I was grounded in pacifism and the arc of history. But my first part of my question just has to do with time, with climate collapse and the collapse of the capitalist economy, and neocolonialism replacing post-colonialism. I just question, how do we deal with not having 70 years to get from Seneca Falls to women getting the vote, and with what happens to borders when we've got 4 billion food refugees. And so part of what excites me about solidarity economy is that it is part of a global movement, as you pointed out to me. And also, I've tried to build these intergenerational structures, revolutionary structures, both the things that you propose, the community land trust, the public banking, et cetera, are examples of that. And in the political work, the Green Rainbow Merger, the DC statehood, Pacific Green Party in Oregon, et cetera. And even flirted with the African People's Socialist Party and the Black Power Blueprint. And part of what excited me about solidarity economy work and PNLL and all that is how similar it was to the Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis. So anyway, you can comment any way you want on that, but I just wanted to throw all those things out there. Oh, one other final thing. The C3 formally can't do electoral, but they've actually gone after C3s for trying to break the blockade in Cuba and Gaza, for instance. And I've had to deal with that as in the Free Mumia Coalition. Our parent C3, we had to switch because of the Cuba caravan. And similarly, the BOE here in New York, as Gloria will attest later on, has been obstructionist because we're not ballot status, but we're still running people for city council and mayor, and we have to report somehow that political activity. The FEC, strangely, is more broad in their interpretation of what's a valid expense to report electorally. But that's just a wrinkle. Anyway, thanks.
So Gloria, I know that you're at work, but if you want to speak in, if we don't hear from you, I'll just assume that that's because you're at work and you can't, but you are next on the stack.
I put something in the chat.
So I'll ask you, Johanna, since I'm just going through this, if you can take a look at that so we make sure to react to it. The last two in this round are Josiah and Lisa. Josiah?
Hi there, thank you. I'm just observing, so I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Lisa?
Hey, I put my questions in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, so Johanna, Adam, I see you raising your hand. I will remind you, you've already gone once, but if you want to jump the stack, just know you're jumping the stack.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that like all of us were I thought that.
That's okay,
sorry,
Adam. No apologies necessary. I'll just clarify. What I'm doing is we've got rounds, and everybody is going to get a chance to go first, and then we're going to open it up. But first, I want to give everybody a chance so that every voice gets to be heard.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Great.
Johanna, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks, everyone, for the great questions. So I'm going to take them, I think, sort of in reverse order here. I'm going to start with your question, Lisa. Will Build and Fight be this? I'm reading from the chat here. Will Build and Fight be a 501c4 umbrella org? Will you establish chapters by state or region? Would this be useful or necessary strategy for supporting local or state initiatives? So I think the answer to that question is probably not. You know, we may at some point in the future entertain the option to be, you know, a fiscal sponsor for a project that we see as particularly exciting. But, you know, this is not intended to be sort of a like big tent umbrella organization where all of that happens. And neither do we contemplate sort of mass mobilizing independently as Build and Fight. You know, we want to support and work with, like David said, you know, where there's ballot initiatives, where there's boots on the ground, where there are campaigns that could use the support of a C4. You know, we are not going to be like doing these things on our own. We are not going to be the only entity involved in these fights. We want to be part of you know, a movement coalition around these reforms. We will help convene some of those conversations. You know, we hope that this work will generate some of those exciting ideas, but I do not have the illusion that we can do this all on our own. I hope that answers that question. I will read Gloria's as well from the chat here. I do not have a question, but I want to say, I think a candidate questionnaire that specifically asks about the 5 aspects of solidarity economy and is an excellent tool the party should use, especially if local and state Green parties are considering coalition building and support of candidates who are not Green Party, because we do not want to build we do want to build alliances with other independent left candidates, other revolutionary/radical organizations. Excellent point, Gloria. Thank you so much. So we have actually we have taken US Solidarity Economy Network candidate questionnaire and expanded that to include.
If there's a way at the top.
So Adam, could I ask you to mute yourself, please?
Thank you. Appreciate you, David. So yes, the US Solidarity Economy Network has a questionnaire about, or a survey rather, of those 5 aspects of solidarity economy, we have taken that and expanded it to include everything in our 3 buckets, not just democratizing the economy, but also democratizing elections and the law. You can find a link to that. I was going to save this plug for a little later, but if you want to learn more, if you want to sign up for emails, please check out our website, buildandfight.org. That's all spelled out, buildandfight.org. And check out the questionnaire if that's something that you think would be useful in your organizing. I totally agree. Gloria, a great way to sort of identify candidates that share our politics, regardless of the label, and regardless of what party they are participating in. Very briefly, like Gil, your question about timing and sort of the urgency of this, like, do we have time to build this stuff? That feels like a long conversation to me, and a really interesting and important one. And that's part of the calculus, right? Like, how much time do we have? What should we be doing now? I had a conversation with a friend recently using the analogy of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. I'm sure folks have heard this, that analogy that, some things that fall sort of below our threshold of non-reformist reforms sometimes feel like that, right? Like, I think a lot of activists are probably frustrated by years of work going into, get some important policy change at some administrative office that has just been, completely defunded or abolished. And so, the idea that we can like tinker at the margins and get to where we need to go is something I think a lot of us agree is we're past that point. There are those on the Titanic who are like, they're already launching the lifeboats, right? Like we are not avoiding this collision. And like, I'm not like critical of that strategy. I think that's an important piece of it. There are others who are, to like torture this analogy a little bit more, like trying to break down the door to the control room to like seize the wheel, right? Like, I would describe this as like, we're having one last desperate conversation with the captain to try to get his attention, and like, y'all like raise the like alarm bells, right? Like, and that's part of why I think this strategy is so appealing to me is, that not everybody's on board with us yet for either launching the lifeboats or breaking down the door to the control room, right? Like, a lot of people know that there's a problem, are concerned about it, don't really know what to do, don't really know where to fit in, see these opposing strategies. And, we want to like shine a light on the contradictions. We want to heighten the level of conversation and make very clear that we're in a crisis moment, and that there is an iceberg dead ahead, and that we need to do something about it. I think we're all in agreement that we're not just rearranging deck chairs anymore, but the sort of the conversation about like what level of urgency we are at, I think is an important and worthwhile discussion. And I would say all of those are important components of it. Those are some of the notes that I jotted. David, do you want to take it up?
Again, no notes. I thought that was perfect. So I see the time. We've got about 15 minutes, so we've got plenty of time to ensure that the round continues. The third round is going to be Nikki, Felina, Russ, Sandy, and then I saw some people have joined since we started this. So I will just say the fourth round will be Athena, D, and then Mike. So round 3, Nikki, Felina, Russ, Sandy. Nikki, you're up.
Morning, David and Johanna. Brilliant presentation. It's all new to me. So my questions, I'm going to hold off till I learn a bit more I'll go to the website, but thank you for presenting this visionary alternative to the structure we have currently. So thank you. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Felina? Again, these are just questions or comments. You can pass if you don't have anything to ask or add.
I guess I had a question about like the endorsements and everything, and I know like you've done so much with Move to Amend, and I mean that's this day the Ohio chapter is still the strongest. But I'm trying to think of like what how we're going to make this work as for our candidates, Pacific candidates, and advocacy issues, and are we doing this to lift the cap on our spending limits that we are usually restricted with compared to C4s and everything to try to help get more attention out? Is that like the main goal with the C4? Because I know it's like there's less of a, I mean, we still have to be accountable and, you know, we still have to report it as a PAC, but is it because of we could do more to get the word out now? Is that the main goal of it?
Thank you. We'll go Russ, Sandy, and then Johanna, and I will respond. Russ? Is Russ still with us?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just observing, so thank you for doing this. It's very informative, and I appreciate you putting in the work. But I have nothing to add. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sandy?
Hi. I asked the question that I wanted to ask in the chat. I am, as some of you know, the Green Party treasurer in New York. So I assume that this structure will need officership like treasury, a treasurer, and other folks to oversee the operations of the 401c4. So, but thank you for this webinar, and I will continue to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. And for Adam, who is visually impaired and not able to access the chat, Adam, I will read both Sandy's question and the answer that was in the chat for your benefit. Sandy had asked, do 501c4s have to report to the FEC or only the IRS? I answered, a 501c4 organization may be required to report to the FEC when making independent expenditures in connection with federal elections. These organizations, a C4 is not automatically considered a political committee subject to the FEC because it depends on what they're actually doing. So it depends on local, state, or federal law, depending on what this tool is actually being used for. So that's the answer to that question. Johanna, I'm going to turn it over to you. And then, but I do have some responses to Felina that I want to address, but I want to give you the chance first as our executive director.
Why don't you start with that, David? I think that would be helpful.
Sure. So, Felina, I really appreciate the good, precise questions that you've asked about the why and the candidates and the endorsement. And I want to take this head on. I am proud to be a registered Green. I've been a registered Green since I helped form the Green Party of Texas back in 1999. But I am not. I have just come to the conclusion that the Green Party alone does not have the power, the strength to do what needs to be done. It's why also, Gil, back to your point, as you know, I probably spend 90% of my social change work now doing non-electoral work. I still think electoral politics, there's a place for it, but it needs to be done in something that's beyond mere partisanship. So for me, as the secretary of this 501c4, I'm going to be much more interested in ballot initiatives that actually are not candidate driven, because I've actually seen a lot of Greens that I've been mortified by the positions that they've taken. I don't believe that the Green Party or any political party is actually capable of doing what needs to be done. So I'm interested in local ballot initiatives. If we really had the juice, statewide ballot initiatives where we actually had real democratic control over those of us who were willing to do the work. The second point I want to make is we're not going to be looking to ask the Green Party for any money whatsoever. We are going to try to raise money for those ballot initiatives. I have successfully raised enough money to be able to provide a little seed money for Johanna as a paid executive director. But we're not going through the Green Party. We are going to be following all the rules for 990 disclosures and so forth. We're going to be very transparent about all of this. But at the end of the day, this is actually about using whatever tools and mechanisms we're able to use to advance a specifically revolutionary eco-socialist worldview around democratizing the economy, democratizing elections, democratizing the law. And when there, and then the last thing that I'll say is, if there are Green Party candidates who are going to want some help on some of the specifics of the kind of things that Johanna and I and others have talked about, we see ourselves as a resource, but we're not actually an arm of the Green Party. The Green Party is going to have to figure out how to do the things that the party apparatus needs to do. So this is something that is a tool that will be available to Greens, but also to Peace and Freedom Party people, to Party for Socialism and Liberation, to independents, to anybody who shares our vision of democratizing everything. Johanna?
Yeah, I'll just a couple thoughts. What are we trying to do here? Yes, we're trying to advance all of these reforms, but we're also trying to talk about them in the same breath, weave them together, and explain a strategy where we need to be thinking about these things as connected, because they are, right? Like, our solution needs to be multifaceted because the problem is multifaceted. I used the phrase Gordian knot earlier, and I don't know if everybody here knows what that is. I will describe very briefly sort of a parable of, there's a legend, I can't even remember where it comes from, embarrassingly, maybe ancient Greek, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say. And the story is of a knot that cannot be picked apart. There are hundreds of people have tried to untie this knot, and there are just too many threads. There's nothing to pull on. It's totally impenetrable. And at some point, somebody just slices it through, just cuts it apart with a knife, saying, these things are intractable on their own. You pull one thread and it makes another one tighter. The idea that our poly crisis, as some people have come to describe it, has started to intersect in ways where the status quo, the powers that be, are trying to pit labor against environment, housing against health, like trying to make this sort of a race to the bottom kind of thing, and just rejecting this sort of piecemeal, we can just fix one thing and then fix another thing, and but really acknowledging that we need to address all of these things and admit to ourselves that they are the forces opposed against us are working in concert, and therefore we need to as well. I'll also just I want to raise up the history of ballot initiatives in this country as instructive or informative to what we're trying to do. That progressive era, end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century in this country, though it had its issues, they did achieve some remarkable things, electorally and otherwise. I think of, the institution of ballot initiatives, the idea, like, that was not a thing before people demanded it. People wanted that form of ability to do an end run around legislatures that were not representing them. And they convinced state legislatures to hand over that power that the legislature held exclusively and share it with the people, which was a monumental undertaking. The 17th Amendment being another one, direct election of senators. The idea that the voters in this country could scare their representatives enough to convince them to vote, to subject themselves to the direct election of the people. Just imagining what that took, what kind of groundswell, what kind of power that the people recognized that they had over their representatives is helpful. And so, but they did fall short, right? Like in Oregon, the progressives were interested there in, like, they had a two-stage plan. They wanted to pass ballot initiatives. They wanted to get the ballot initiatives so that they could, via ballot initiative, pass proportional representation. They fell short there. They did not ultimately end up winning proportional representation, but they got halfway there, and we are left with the tools that they gave us. And so I think important to think about like how important that option is, though we only have ballot initiatives in about half the states. At the state level, local level and referenda are also options. And so I obviously get excited about those. So those are pieces that I wanted to lift up from that. We are running short on time, David. Where would you like
well,
to
we do have I'm just going to open up the space because I think that Holly is the only one left who has come in after we did our go round. So Holly, I'll just invite you. You can pass, but if you have a comment or a question, this is a space for you. And then I'm going to turn it over to you, Johanna, to bring us home.
I was just going to have to get ready for another presentation, but I just wanted to check in here. Thank you for doing what you're doing, because I think it's going to be a critical effort, and I hope it catches on with many more initiatives. So thank you very much, and I will be looking forward to learning more about it. Thank you.
Johanna, we have 7 minutes left, so I hope I gave you enough time. And I really think that I hope that folks agree with me that opening it up to hear all the voices and give everybody a chance was the right move to make. So Johanna, close us out, lady.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a few more comments like, thank you. Some states have no mechanism for citizen-driven ballot initiatives. That's true. Like I mentioned, only about half the states have that option. And so, we do what we can in the other states. We still have the opportunity to lobby and encourage candidates to be talking about that. I mean, there are a lot of new efforts now to expand ballot initiatives. That, like I said, a lot of that comes out of work 100 years ago, but recognizing how valuable that tool is, there are folks working on that and talking about that now in a way that they weren't 5-10 years ago. And Gil, 2 words: dual power. Thank you for that. Absolutely. Here. Just a few more minutes. I don't have a lot in closing. Just really want to echo David's appreciation for you all showing up. I'm glad we had a nice group discussion here. Everybody, really appreciate your input. I will just make one more final plug for folks to stay in touch. I am actually going to, let's see, I have my email up on a slide. I'm just going to share my screen again very briefly, just so to make sure folks can get in touch, can stay in touch. Also, somebody put a link to the website in the chat earlier. Thank you for that. This on the screen is not clickable, but buildandfight.org. And my email is just my first name, last name @gmail.com. That's Johanna Epke, Johanna Epke @gmail.com. Please reach out if you have any lingering questions or you want to connect and figure out how we work together.
So that is the end of this session. This was the introductory session. I will conclude by joining Johanna and thanking each of you for coming in. Thank you for keeping the Green Party going. Again, I'm proud to be a registered Green, have been continuously since 1999, had the great privilege of helping to form the Green Party of Texas, and was the lawyer for the National Green Party. The Federal Election Commission did the FEC filing that made us recognized by this apparatus. Ran for Attorney General in Texas in 2002 and President in 2004. So, and then managed the Jill Stein and Jamu Baraka campaign in 2016. So my Green Party, I'm not trying to do it as credentials, but my commitment and belief in the Green Party is absolutely unwavering. And I have come to the realization that the Green Party alone is simply not going to be capable of doing what I think needs to be done. So this tool, we hope, is in addition to, it can do some things that the Green Party cannot do. And we welcome Greens participating. And if you've got folks who are not in the Green Party but are good social change revolutionary activists that you want to push our way, please encourage them to do so, because that's something that we can do because we are not an organ or arm of the Green Party or even a front group for the Green Party. We are something different. The last thing that I'll say in the last couple of minutes is Johanna, myself, and Gloria Matera are going to be doing another session on this Build and Fight on August 16 with the Green Eco-Socialist Network, which is yet another entity that runs parallel to the Green Party. If you're interested in that, you can hit me or Gloria up. I'm David K. Cobb at Gmail. I'm very, make myself wide open in the public space. Sometimes it takes me a while to get back, but I think some of you on this webinar know that I, in fact, do engage. Sometimes it takes me a little time. So thank you all for what you do. And with that, I just want to say thank you. Have a great annual national meeting. Bye, y'all. Peace.
Thanks all.